Now the fun begins. So far I presented the scenario, the prerequisites, and I explained how federation and provisioning work. What we need to do now is to configure Shibboleth, editing some of the Shibboleth configuration files. First of all, we activate Shibboleth login on login.xml. I create a backup copy of login.xml in case we need to restore the initial settings. Then I edit login.xml and I change to debug the level details. Here I can copy and then paste also here, here, and for this line I can just take it out of the comments. I save and close. Then I wanted to configure the Tomcat Web Application Manager credentials in Tomcat Users XML, which we can find here. What I have to do is just to go to the bottom of the file and add these two lines. Now we configure the SSL certificates for Shibboleth. We need two changes in the Relying Party file: the private key file name, the certificate file name, plus one change in IDP metadata XML. Let's do it. We edit Relying Party XML, then we change IDP to my STS, which is the private key name, then the certificate name, my STS, and it's done. Plus one change here in the metadata folder. What we have to do here is to replace the certificate with the one that we created initially. So we take from the credentials folder, here it is, we copy the certificate and we paste it here twice, because I have to replace here and below. And now we just save the file. Let me just recall that we already set useStartTLS to false in attribute resolver. Well, Shibboleth Identity Provider needs information about the Windows Azure AD Relying Party. So we have to either download the Windows Azure AD metadata from this link, or we could just put a URL to that file in our configuration. But in our case, we needed to choose the first option because we needed to change it in order to make it work with active clients. That we'll do at the end of this presentation. This is the link to the file hosted on Microsoft platform. We can just save the file locally within the metadata folder, and we can call it Windows AD metadata XML. To enable communication between Shibboleth Identity Provider and Windows Azure Active Directory, we needed to add Windows Azure AD as a relying party. Two things to do. First, tell Shibboleth how to find Windows Azure AD metadata. You can do this by adding an entry to Relying Party file in the Metadata Provider node. Relying Party, edit, line 80. Secondly, define a new Relying Party element in the same Relying Party file right after the default Relying Party element, because Windows Azure AD requires changes to the default SAML2 profile settings. Line 62. Please note a couple of things. First of all, the relying party ID must match the entity ID value of the metadata. Let's check it. We take the metadata, which is here, and we can see that the metadata entity ID, URN Federation Microsoft Online, matches the relying party ID. Secondly, the provider value must match the entity ID of our Shibboleth identity provider specified in the default relying party element, which is here. Okay, we can save this file. Now we configure a Shibboleth attribute definition to locate the shadow account in Attribute Resolver XML. Well, without too many details, please note that the user ID takes the UPN, while the immutable ID claim takes the object GUID. And as you may remember, the object GUID must be base64 encoded. We can close the previous files. Then we take Attribute Resolver XML, line 29, for the user principal name matching the user ID, line 35 for the immutable ID, line 366 we have to replace object seed with object GUID, and here as well in the comment. Well, let's save this file as well and close Notepad. Now we configure the Shibboleth IDP attribute filter to release the two attributes, immutable ID and user ID, to Windows Azure Active Directory in Attribute Filter XML. Attribute filter, edit. These settings use specific attribute filter policy IDs to indicate the attributes required by Windows Azure Active Directory. Save and close again. Finally, we configure Shibboleth LDAP passive authentication in this function of login.config, which should have both TLS and SSL parameters set to false. Login.config, TLS false and SSL false. Let's close Notepad again. We must now restart the service. We can also first stop the service, then delete the log files here for Apache and here for Shibboleth, and then we start the service again, so that we can now try passive federation. This is a new browser that I'm using to avoid cookies. What I can do is to call outlook.com/federated domain, which is my domain eduteamit.com in this case. This way, the Microsoft Federation Gateway forwards the user to its federation server, where I can enter the user credentials, take the token, and get in. Sarah Connor. As you can see, it works. It would work the same if I tried to log on the Office 365 main console. I can put any name for the same domain, even non-existing domain as this one. I'm redirected to my security token service without being asked the password. I can put my credentials here, the same that I used before. And I'm in as well. Well, what just misses now is the active federation. Let's do it.